questions that were submitted ahead of time through Qualtrics, and then you're also, all the attendees are able to submit anonymous questions through the question and answer function on the webinar. So if you go to the question and answer tab, you can select anonymous and send it to us, and we will monitor that during the session and give those questions to the panel to address. So myself, Jennifer Didier, professor in Department of Kinesiology, and Jamie Anderson, assistant professor in the Department of Psychology, are going to moderate this webinar. And our panelists are representing 4 of our 8 colleges and bring with them years of academic experience, scholarship, service, and leadership. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves and give a brief summary of their journey to tenure and promotion. And so we will start with Dr. Julie Combs from the College of Education.
So hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you could join us. This is exactly one of the type of workshops that I would have been at in 2005, trying to figure out what I need to do to keep my job here. So a little bit just about how I got started. Before I took the job at Sam Houston, I really in the interview process made sure it was a place that I could get tenure, assuming I did all the work. I wanted to make sure that the politics were right, and I had some wise advisors tell me to ask questions in the interview process, such as, if someone didn't get tenure in this department, what were the reasons? And what is the provost role in the tenure process? And what is the dean's role? Because every university, there's nuances, although the process is kind of similar, there are nuances in how the tenure system works. So just learning about that, learning what tenure is, why I would even want it in the first place. I'm a second career academic. I come from the K-12 background, and of course we didn't have tenure in Texas. So I just at the time thought, I don't need tenure, as long as I'm performing, I'm good. And I learned really quickly that that's not how it worked. So just learning how the system works is something really important. I brought in 1 year with me. I did have some experience before I came here. I was tenured in 2010, well, 5 years later. And then I was promoted to full professor 5 years later. So what I did to get tenured, that was one of the questions, is I assessed myself. I assessed myself in the area of teaching, research, and service, because those are the things that I would be judged on. And really of those 3 areas, my weakest area was research. I was a practitioner and didn't have a lot of research experience since my dissertation. So that was something I really had to learn. And so that was my goal. I went to workshops. I sat in professors' classes who taught the research courses in our doctoral programs. I paired up with many different, I say I have a team of mentors who helped me in those first few years. I worked with several people and I selected them. Although people did come to me and ask me, do you want to work with me? I selected who I wanted to work with because I was really careful about that selection process. I wanted to make sure I was choosing people who were really going to help me. And so I'm pretty perceptive. So I just kind of sat back initially, you know, got a lay of the land, and then decided who I wanted to work with. And I did turn people down, and I would just say things like, I'm too busy and that sort of thing. But that's something to really be careful about, is who you choose to work with. These mentors helped me tremendously. I read books, and I would have at least an annual planning session where we would map out, okay, these are the research conferences coming up. These are the projects that I have. And then these are all the different stages that they could be in this coming year. And so I had various projects in each of the 5 or 6 stages of that research life cycle. So that I always had things coming. And the suggestion to me was to learn what the expectations are of my department, which is educational leadership, and then exceed those. And so that's exactly what I did. I worked really hard. I had young kids at the time. It was just very stressful. That's all I can say. But I really tried to navigate politics. I had people that would tell me the truth, And I think all of those things are really important to just be as aware as possible. So good for you for being here today. So I'll just leave it at that and share from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next panelist is Dr. Anne Gilliard. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I apologize if I'm not. She is joining us from the College of Science and Engineering Technology.
Hello, everyone. So I am tenured in the Department of Biological Sciences. That's my home department, and I'm still a half-time faculty member there. So I'm a half-time administrator and half-time faculty member. And I began here at SAM in 2004. It was not my first tenure track position. My very first one was at North Georgia University. And I was there 3 years, and then we had to make a family move to the Houston, Texas area. So I had to start over on tenure, which was a little sad and frustrating. But at the same time, I sort of considered my first 3 years as a really good experience, almost like a postdoc that helped prepare me for my tenure track time here. So I was tenured in 2010. Like Julie, same year. And I have not been promoted yet to full professor. I might talk about that a little bit later. Still working on that. And I think I will just share a couple of things that I thought really helped me to get tenure and things that I wish that maybe I had known and done differently that made it more challenging. So first of all, I think collaborations are extremely important. I think the collaborations I had were really key for my research productivity. And I do agree with Julie, you have to be careful who you collaborate with. But I was fortunate that the people I collaborated with were very helpful and beneficial. And we were able to accomplish some research together, including publication or two. And I think on the other side, I wish that I had been a little more careful about taking on service roles as a non-tenured faculty member. I think that women in particular are expected to say yes to service roles, especially those that are not valued at the same level as other accomplishments like research productivity. And I wish I'd been a little better about saying no. Having said that, the administrative and service experiences that I've had have been wonderful, and I've learned a lot from them, but it did make the tenure process more difficult. So I just want to caution everyone about that. It's difficult to say no, but I think it's important for us to set our boundaries and ask others to respect our goals of obtaining tenure, which are primarily research and teaching. So I think lastly, I would just say I became a half-time administrator in 2011 when I joined the dean's office here in the College of Science and Engineering Technology. And so it's been an interesting time to balance administration, teaching, and research. It's never dull.
Thank you very much. All right, next we have Dr. Amanda Scarbrough from the College of Health Sciences.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much again for being here. I am very recently tenured as of this summer of 2020, and promoted from assistant to associate. This is not my first tenure track position. I was in a tenure track position at a different institution. And like Dr. Gilliard mentioned, I had to make some transitions and for family reasons, and I transitioned out of academics into industry because I wasn't sure that it was the right place for me to be, especially because the tenure process at the other university that I was at was so stressful. And it gave me a lot of experience to think about how to approach it when I came back to academics. My things that helped me, I think that have been mentioned before, really are collaborations. And again, I do echo the fact that being careful with your collaborations is important, but collaborations, not only for me, what worked were collaborations not only within my department, but also within my college, within the university, and within the community. So I tried to collaborate across different avenues, because I think, as Dr. Combs mentioned, it's important to have research, because one of the challenging things I think about tenure is that research portion, but to have things kind of in the pipelines, and being able to collaborate with a multitude of different kind of community members and academics and different people helped me be more productive, but also maintaining that research line. I think what's really become important when we're talking about things that helped me get tenure is establishing a research line and making sure what I was doing fit well within that line, whether or not it was research with the community or research within the university or research within my department, making sure all of that fit within my line of research. So some of the hurdles I think are also, again, as have been mentioned, are the service aspects of it. It is difficult to say no to service, but I do encourage you to do it. I encourage you, and what worked for me is to go to my supervisor and say, I have been asked to serve on this committee, or I have been asked to participate at the university level in this way. What are your thoughts? And to get my supervisor's opinion about that, and in some ways to be an advocate for you, where he can say, or he or she can say no for you, so it doesn't come off as you being the bad guy and saying no. But it is important to say no and to protect yourself. And I think that's one of the things I struggled with early on. And as I got further into my packet, or my time coming up to tenure and promotion, I was a little bit more assertive about saying no. I'm not saying say no to everything. I'm saying know when to say no. And it is okay. But those are kind of some of my experiences that some of the challenges that I faced when going up for tenure.
Thank you. And our final panelist is Dr. Anelka Simmons from the College of Business.
Yes, first I just want to thank everyone for being here, and I'm so happy to be a part of this panel. Thank you guys for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And I also agree, this is something that I would have definitely signed up for during my time of pursuing tenure and promotion. So similar to the ladies on the panel, this is not my first career. I used to be an information technology consultant. I used to consult with Accenture and Capgemini Ernst & Young. And basically, I came into academia because, number one, I love to learn and I enjoy people. And I think that to piggyback on what they were talking about with regards to service, I'll go in a different direction. I'll start with service first, is that I totally agree. The power of no is important, to be able to say no to things that don't fit what your skill sets are. So for me, I try to assess and understand what my passions are. And then I try to get involved in service about things that I really do care about. And then it's something that I enjoy. So for example, what we're doing today, I enjoy having these conversations. It's service, but it's something that I appreciate and that I'm participating in. In terms of teaching and research, I always hang on some of my core values, which is quality. So I want to have quality classes, and I want to do research with people who help me be better and help me to improve. So when I was coming up for tenure, and I got tenure in 2006, no, excuse me, I came here in 2006, sorry. I got tenure in 2013, and then I became a full professor last year. And just like you all said, I try to always have some things in the pipeline, some projects at the beginning stages, some things in the pipeline, and then some things that we're just kind of refining. So I always try to do that. And again, with regards to research, I always try to study things that I'm actually interested in, so that when I'm doing the work, it's not something that I just dread doing it. But no, I'm actually interested. And in terms of collaborations, I totally agree with that. With what has been said, I agree with collaborating with people inside your department and then without your department, and then as well as outside of the university. I think, you know, just having a reputation of someone that gets things done and, you know, is someone that's always going to be respectful, I think is important. I like how you all said, if you have to say no, you all said maybe have a person more senior to you to have that conversation to provide context. So yeah, that's my belief. And again, the biggest thing for me is following your passions and being true to yourself in terms of your core values as you maneuver the academic experience.
Thank you very much. All right, so what we will do is we'll pull from some of the questions that were submitted initially, and then we'll start pulling from the ones that are coming in through the question and answer function. So the first one we have is, in the wake of COVID-19, our university is offering us to move our tenure clocks back 1 year. I know of cases at other institutions where faculty members who stopped the tenure clock felt that they faced higher expectations than their peers who declined to interrupt the tenure clock. Are you confident that SHSU will hold similar expectations for faculty regardless of whether they change their tenure timelines? So I'm going to start with letting Anne address this, and then anyone else can jump in.
Okay, there we go. So I really do believe, I have confidence that SHSU will not penalize faculty who have elected to stall their tenure clock. And one of the main reasons I have confidence in that is we have a very clearly written policy on this, that faculty may do this and that they may not be penalized for doing so. So I think at the start of every DIPTAC, as we call those, it's important to remind the faculty of that policy, that we must follow it, and we must not have different standards for faculty that stalled their tenure clock and those that didn't. Secondly, I think in the case of COVID-19, I think this is something that everybody can empathize with. So we have all been through a difficult time. It's still a difficult time. And I think we've all been affected by it one way or another. As instructors, probably we can all say it is much harder to teach right now than it ever has been before. And that means we have less time for research than we normally would. I can't speak for everybody here, but you know, I'm in the sciences, and there were months where nobody was in my research lab because nobody could be here. So we lost a lot of time. And I really believe that since all faculty have experienced this difficulty, that they are going to be empathetic to faculty who have been through it as a non-tenured faculty member.
All right, does anyone else want to jump in from the panel? If not, I'll go to the follow-up question. Very good. All right, so kind of a follow-up or an alternative idea that was also proposed is, rather than stopping the tenure clock for a year, would the university consider other accommodations? So can tenure expectations for this year just be reduced rather than stopped completely? Perhaps the tenure expectations could be divided over the 6 years and then reduced by a certain percentage to account for 2020, which would allow for more equity across faculty. This might help those whose primary data collection is being delayed. As a group, we could come up with other potential accommodations based on the needs of the group. So if Dr. Simmons, if you want to address.
Yes, thank you. I think that's an excellent question. And I think the word tolling has already been used, right? Where you stop the clock. And I think that I kind of did some reading on this, and tenure is like one of the most important decisions that the departments and colleges make. So I think I get the feeling, I get the impression that some colleges would definitely not be comfortable with the term of lowering expectations. But I think that if tolling literally means stopping the clock. So let's say you're supposed to have 6 pubs, or 1 per year, right, on a 6-year time period. On year 7, instead of increasing, which I think some people feel like, well, if we stop the clock, then maybe they'll increase expectations. In that 7th year, if you go up for tenure, it would not be now, since you've had 7th year, 7 publications, but it would be 6. So I think that in terms of saying lowering expectations, which I got the impression when I was researching this, that the people might bristle at that. It's just stopping the clock. If you did have primary data collection challenges and lab challenges, that's okay, because for that 7th year, we're still only looking for 6 pubs, if that makes sense.
Any other thoughts from other panelists? Or thoughts in general about stopping the tenure clock? If you have any sage advice for people who are considering this now, or maybe have considered this in the past because of family issues, or
yeah, I mean, I can speak more to that, because actually when I was at Sam Houston, I've been married for 18 years, and I became pregnant one of the years that I was here, and I utilized the tolling option, and basically I went up 1 year after, and just similar as I just explained, when my packet, I wanted to present a solid packet, I believe it was, and I was successful with it. And so my advice would be, if you feel that you're ready to go up, then I say go up. If you feel like you have everything that they're asking you to do, I say go for it. However, if you feel like you want to do a little bit more and you're not sure, I would err on the side of caution and maybe take that extra year, because just like Ann said, I believe the policy is clear, and I don't think that it would be used against you. I would not stress myself like that. Like we've all said, the process is stressful, like Julie mentioned, having kids and all these types of things. So yeah, I would take that extra year if I felt that I needed it. But if I was ready, then I would go for it.
All right, hearing no other comments, we'll move on to our next question, which is about teaching. And the question is, how do you carefully document that you are improving your teaching each year? And I will punt that question first to Dr. Scarbrough.
So what I did, so first of all, what I want to say is everybody's going to have a bad semester. Okay, everybody's going to have a bad semester. There's going to be classes you don't click with. There'll be something that happens. I mean, it's normal. So what I have been told, or what we have the understanding is it has to be that your teaching continues to improve along a reasonable trajectory. You cannot expect that everybody's going to get 4.9s and 5.0s and 4.7s every single semester in every single class. I don't think that's realistic. What I did when I turned in my tenure packet is I created a graph, a chart that charted, I looked at excellence of course, excellence of professor, excellence of, I can't remember, I took my idea scores and I created a chart that showed their trajectory of where my teaching was going. And there was a downturn. There was a semester that it didn't click. It was the class, it was me, whatever it was. And I had an explanation about what happened that semester, because it's going to happen. I mean, I think it is just a good idea to be honest and to admit what's going on when you have that downturns, and to be on top, in front of it, rather than to try to hide behind it. But the way I showed the trajectory of my teaching is I just created at the end of my packet, I had a chart, an Excel created chart that showed where my teaching had gone over the course of the semester, and some of the categories that I selected. And I think that visualization was easy for my committee members. I don't think anybody wants your committee members hunting and pecking through your entire package, right? We want to make this process as easy for the people who are reviewing your tenure packet as possible. And I think having something visual that displayed every single semester of every single course that I ever taught at the university was a very quick snapshot for them to look at. And again, where there was a downturn, I had an explanation for it.
Great, thank you. All right, so our next question has to do back with scholarship. So how do you divide responsibilities when writing with a team of authors? For example, when thinking of name order for a publication, what's the difference between the second and third author or third and fourth? So if Dr. Combs, if you want to address this one.
Sure. So first of all of us have talked about choosing your teams carefully. And what we mean by that, or at least what I mean by that, is there were lots of people that came to me to offer to work with me or to include me in on a project. That was part of the culture of the department I came into. But one thing I saw in my past higher ed position, which was non-tenure track, was that there are people who are the workers, and then there are the people who, I'll just call them the takers. So they want their name on the project, but they're not necessarily going to do the work. And for me, that wasn't really along the lines of a gender type issue. That was actually, there were women who I had to just watch out more for that than just the men initially. But I just I observed people and I tried to find out who was getting things accomplished and who seemed like a good person to work with. They were going to be fair and they were going to be kind. And, you know, because really in higher ed, I really believe we're all kind of just managing our egos, and some of us hide it better than others. And, you know, so I was just looking for those kind of things, those kind of signs of, is this a person that shares? Is this person, you know, they play well with others. And so when one of my mentors said from the very first research meeting that we had, decide what roles are going to be on this publication. So before we even start the research project, decide who's the first author, who's the second, who's the third. And maybe that will change as you go through the project. But initially put that out in the meeting. It's an awkward conversation, but go ahead and have it so that that is clear and upfront and people know those expectations. The mentors I worked with as an early assistant professor, for the most part, were there to mentor me and guide me. And I would often be the first author because, you know, here at Sam Houston, as part of our department, we don't have a requirement that you have to be first author any number of times or to any certain extent. So a lot of times the tenured mentoring faculty weren't really interested in being first author. You know, they've already have achieved that. So those were the kind of people that I chose to work with. And I think it's just really knowing about people and of course their interests, their area of work, but also just their skills and their work ethic.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on that. Julie, I totally agree with you on working with people that want to get things done and people that are kind. And I like how you talked about having a meeting at the beginning to talk about, you know, how you were going to lay out the order of authorship. But then sometimes I've found it over my years that sometimes that doesn't work because maybe things are too abstract. So maybe we all do the work. And then if it's people, like you said, that we can, you know, you can trust them and, you know, everybody has good intentions, that when it's all done, then you're like, well, you kind of, you know, took the lead more here. So you can be first author and then second, third, and fourth and so forth. So I think if you're working with people that you trust, you always want to have like guidelines. But if you're working trust, I think it kind of shakes out. And at the end of the project, it becomes really clear who was the first author and who wasn't and so forth. So that's kind of my experience. But in my mind, the first author is the person who has the vision and takes the lead on things. That's what the first author is doing. Then everyone else contributes and provides their skill sets and what have you.
And a follow-up question that we received in our chat that is in line with the scholarship theme that we have now is that if you've never had the opportunity to collaborate on research, even in your PhD program, what advice would any of you have on finding collaborations and figuring out how to work on research with others?
Well, that's something that I wish that I had done more. I wish that I had pursued collaborations outside of the university, but I was shy to do it. And if I could go back and give myself advice, I would say, get over it, don't be shy, and reach out. I have people that I know in my field an hour away. And so that would have been a good place to start. Who's at A&M that I know in my field? And I would just recommend reaching out to them and just explaining that you'd like to see if there's any common ground and any collaborations that you could set up together. And my finding as I've matured in my academic career is they are often very willing to help out. My colleagues at A&M have more resources than I do here. And they recognize that, and they are more than willing to open up their resources to have me and my students use them so that we can address some research questions that we couldn't otherwise. So my advice is don't be shy, look for who's in your field and see if there's anybody who's not too far away geographically and just reach out.
And to piggyback on what Dr. Gilliard said, I would advise not to just stick to academia. Partner with your community members. I published 2 articles by partnering with the Montgomery County United Way. They had some data, they didn't know what to do with it. They were interested in getting some of their results and had no idea how to disseminate their findings. So I think, academic and as well as community partnerships are a really good way to get some research accomplished. So get out there and mingle, right? Just get out there and don't be shy and know people, not only in academics, but within your community as well.
And I was also going to say, and I agree with you, Ann, like I work with a lot of people from Texas A&M. That's where I got my PhD from. But in some ways, Sam Houston has resources that may be unique. For example, when I was at that stage in my career, we had a liberal research budget. So that was something that, I could contribute where it may have taken lots of steps and paperwork and lots of time to do it at their university. So like find the ways that you can contribute and ways that you can be benefit. Everyone wants to be in a beneficial relationship. So just like Julie said, you don't want to be with people that work with people that are just takers, and you don't want to just be a taker. You want to be able to contribute and have that relationship that's mutually beneficial for everybody involved. And I think keeping that in mind is really important.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and add that also here on campus, the ORSP, the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, is also a place that you can reach out to because they see what's going on all around campus. And so you can say, here's some topics or areas that I'm interested in doing research. Is there anyone else on campus doing something like that? And they might be able to, they may already know, or they can help you kind of make some of those connections as well. As well as sometimes in your college, if you have any kind of college gatherings pre-COVID, so whatever college gathering looks like now, but you can also sort of see what people are doing and try to make some connections even within on campus. So, and then one other thing I was just going to add when we were talking about the different roles and determining who does what. Similar to what Amanda was talking about in the teaching portfolio, you do the same thing with your research and presenting that picture. And so you would want to kind of identify within the different manuscripts or within your publications, kind of what was your role, what percentage and what work to give the DipTac and reviewers an idea, because like you said, what is the difference between second and third or third and fourth? Sometimes it just varies on the project. So that's part of that picture that you're going to present to your DipTac and any other outside reviewers. So All right, so let's see get
So
my,
Jennifer, one advantage is if you do have a fairly large department, is identifying tenured faculty members, maybe just one that you'd like to work with or learn from. I co-authored, I think, with 3 of the tenured faculty members. And what that does is it when they're reviewing you, there's a voice about your work ethic. Now it's important, that you keep your commitments and you work really hard, because it could also go the other way for you. But I made a point to have people both within my department and then outside the university to work with. And initially I was managing too many projects at one time. Now I kind of think 3 to 4 is a magic number, but there was a time when I had, double digits, and it was pretty challenging. So
great advice. So yeah, and especially when you're in different departments that have such a wide variety of areas and disciplines, and it's hard if there's no one, like you said, that voice at the table, because you're not necessarily there. Your portfolio's there, but you're not there. And so having individuals that at least are familiar with what it is that you've done is important. So thank you. So we had a question submitted ahead of time that is a somewhat of a follow-up, but a little bit different take. So I know, Dr. Combs, you said that you found people that were trustworthy and good to work with, but sometimes we can misidentify things or choose wrongly. And so the question is, how do you or did you manage, and this is directed towards male, but senior male faculty who tried to help you in your tenure process, but ultimately seemed to want equal credit for your hard work, or ultimately ended up being more of a burden than a help? I might just stop. I'll stop there for now.
yeah, we live and learn. I mean, I've been on a few of those teams. The good news is I didn't keep repeating that same mistake. But yes, I will say for me, it was not a gender issue. I found people were takers, both men and women. And honestly, you just learn. Like, I just observed. That's how I learned. And I did have to make mistakes because I had to get started. I couldn't wait 2 years to figure all that out. So.
And again, I agree. Like, even if a situation doesn't go the way you want it to, that's a learning opportunity, because what we're trying to do is just refine how we approach things as we move forward in this field. So yes, I've been in situations like that as well, but I learned about, how to have the tough conversations. Brene Brown is, all her work is out there now, and she really, really emphasizes on having courageous conversations in her book, Dare to Lead. So I think that that's something that we have to be able to do with respect. But it's a learning, it's a process and it's a journey. So I agree.
Hey, we're good. So sorry, I'll read the rest of it. So it says, it seems like many women in academia get branded as crazy, stupid, or bitchy as they gain more status. How have you dealt with these differing views of women as you progress in your career? And did you notice any shifts after promotion?
Yeah, so there's a quote, someone said this, that it's really not my business what you think of me. Now that didn't always work well for tenure committees, but if I can try to do my job and do my best, and play well with others and be respectful and be collegial, for the most part, it's going to work out. But I will say it's really important to know your DipTac and to know your tenured faculty members, and to know who you can trust, and to know who you need to say good morning to every single time you see them. Like, you just have to, that is just part of getting tenure for me, is learning those dynamics and just having conversations and going to them and asking questions for advice. I would do that a lot. I would go and ask people for advice because I really wanted to know their different opinions. And I would say when I see new assistant professors and they don't get out and they don't, interact with the tenured faculty members, I understand because I'm shy too, but that's just so important to push yourself out there, to ask questions, to ask for advice, to say things like, around here, how is this done? Or around here, how important are grants? Or how important are books? Or how important is this? Or should I say no to this? Or is this something I can't say no to? Because because you guys talked about balancing service, and I agree. I do think women get a good load of service, but I also worked with a bunch of women and the expectation was we all do our service. So me saying no to things would not have been a good move for me tenure wise in my first few years. I would try to talk and have a discussion about, well, these are all the things I'm responsible for, so I might not be able to do it to this level of expectation, or these are all the things I have on my plate. What do you suggest I do less of? So those kind of conversations with my supervisors, but often it was my supervisors asking me. So that was a rock and a hard place.
So one of the things that kind of is my, I guess, general life philosophy is to build relationships when you don't need somebody. So you want to build relationships with your DipTac, with your department, with people in your college when you don't need something from them. Stop in. I talk to every single person on my DipTac committee just to have a conversation with them. Like, how's it going? What are you working on? What's going on in classes? So building that relationship when you don't need something from them. So when the time comes that you do need something from them, they can remember all this past history that you've had with them. But I really think that's an important thing, aspect of life is other people have mentioned the takers, right? There are people who are always the takers. You have to also be a giver. So building those relationships, maintaining those, even now that I'm even post tenure, I continue to talk to people who will be 7 years from now looking at my package to go up for full if I choose to go that way. So keeping those relationships going in times of when you need them and times when you don't need them.
And I'll just say for me, when I went up for tenure, not for full professor, but when I went up for tenure, I actually asked every person on the DipTac to just go have tea or coffee with me. That was when we were on campus more often. Things are different now. So, it's a different situation. Maybe you ask for a quick Zoom or a quick phone call. But I did go and have tea and lunch and just not tea, lunch with people I was closer with, but tea or coffee with others. And just kind of, talk like Amanda said, not like, the month before voting, but like a year before, just as she said, build those relationships, people are people. You want to get to know people. Everyone has something interesting to share. So you kind of let them get to know who you are, because collegiality is a part of what we do. And we want to make sure that we know one another and support one another. So I did do that and understand what people are saying about being shy, but we're putting a lot of work into this. And so you want to make sure you're successful. So sometimes we got to, move past those uncomfortable feelings to do what may be helpful for us moving forward.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, part of the question was gender expectations of women's roles. And I think this just really underscores how important it is to have a diverse faculty and to have diverse leaders. Because the more faculty members we have in our departments and in leadership positions of diverse backgrounds, it begins to break down those expectations about how someone's supposed to be. And so I just think this is a really important goal to work toward as a university.
And our next question is kind of in the same topic area about gender expectations, but specific to student expectations in the instructor role. And the question is, how do you balance gender expectations from students? It seems that men are allowed to be more straightforward or tough, whereas women are expected to be kind and nurturing if they want good teaching evaluations. And a follow-up, how do you respond when someone calls you miss? first name or Miss last name, especially when male colleagues are given the title doctor in similar settings.
And I can go first. I'm sure
Go ahead,
I'm sure we've all dealt with that. And what I do is on the first day of class, I just say, and when I started here, I was, obviously younger, and sometimes I would get, what's the word, confused for maybe being a student. And it was, it was just weird. And so what I would do is at the beginning of class, at the first week or the first day, I would say, I'm Dr. Simmons, and I respond to Dr. Simmons and Professor Simmons. And that was it. And if you said hey to me or whatever, I just didn't respond. And then it was Dr. Simmons and Professor Simmons, and it was just that simple. What was the other question? There was something else. What was it?
About, I think, gender expectations kind of within the classroom, about men sort of having more freedom to be straightforward and tough.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm kind of saying similar things to these questions because I'm a big believer in humanizing myself. I am a human being. I have feelings, but yes, these are my standards, and this is the way we're going to do it here. I try to say it with grace and with kindness, but I agree that maybe when women behave in a way, just like as Ann said, that's not congruent with expectations, then we might be evaluated differently or treated differently. But maybe in some ways we kind of, bring those things to the surface and kind of have a conversation about it. But I teach organizational behavior. So having those kind of discussions is part of what I do. So it wouldn't be weird if we bring up a discussion about, well, why are men evaluating? You know what I mean? So I understand that people may be in different fields, but in my organization, in what I'm doing, I can have those conversations openly and just kind of address some of those challenges. I mean, you all in different colleges, how do you all handle that?
Well, this is something that I really experienced when I was a brand new faculty member in North Georgia. I was pretty young, and I don't know if it was the culture where I was, but particularly there, the students expected me to be mothering. And I'm not a mom, and I don't know why they expect me to be mothering just because I'm a woman. But even if I were a mom, I'm not going to be a mom in the classroom, right? That's just totally different. But it really surprised me. I was very naive that I might be treated like that. And I think I first just had to have some grace with them that, I think they're not intending to be offensive or disrespectful when they say Miss Ann or Miss Gilliard. But at the same time, I felt that I needed to establish a different culture. And I just started doing so, when they would write me an email that would say, Miss Gilliard this, I would always sign it Dr. Gilliard, just trying to get them to see what my expectations were. But I think also, I would just recommend have the confidence that you can have your classroom environment the way you see fit. Don't feel that you need to bend to their expectations of you being soft or mothering. Just be firm, be strong, and help them to see that that is not the situation it's not appropriate for the classroom environment, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I guess I have always attributed that more to age than to gender, although I do know that there are gender roles like that. I just feel like in my college, there have been women before me who really established themselves in that way before I ever came. But as a young school principal, with a doctorate degree, there'd be parents that would come in the front office and I'd be sitting at the desk and they want to speak to Dr. Combs, the principal. And of course, they didn't know that was me. So it was just always kind of funny to see their reaction. And I really agree with what you guys are saying. Like you just establish that culture. So we do that with our students at our initial orientation, and we introduce our faculty members and we talk about that. Our students tend to know more about higher education than students who haven't been in higher ed before. So we do have a different set of circumstances. So I primarily teach people who are either teachers or school principals or school superintendents or work in higher education in some level. And so many of these, so us as teachers, we were trained in teaching, like that's just who we are, our degrees in teaching, our first degrees in teaching. And we've been teaching and thinking of teaching our whole life. So for me, it was really just a second nature, but I just found students expected a whole lot because they evaluated teachers all day and they expected to see what we see in our classrooms in terms of what an ideal lesson is. And so my goal early on was to offer students something that they really believe was worth their time to come to my class. That if students didn't want to come to my class, then it better be because it wasn't because they weren't interested or they were going to miss something. And that's just kind of how I've always approached it, to offer something to people that they want to be there and they don't want to miss it. And of course they will from time to time, and that's fine. But that's just what I always worked for. I had mentors who told me I spent way too much time preparing lessons and teaching, that I should have been spending more of that time in the research area. But honestly, it's my first love. So that's just where I put my time, and I still do to this day.
Dr. Simmons, were you going to say something or? Oh,
No, I'm just agreeing. That was
okay,
awesome.
perfect. No problem. So there's a follow-up statement or question of, would you go as far as putting this in the syllabus as far as the preference to be called a doctor? And I'll just quick answer on that. I do have it in the syllabus. I have it for the how to address me in an email. So it says, like, for email correspondence, say, "Dear Dr. Didier." And then, I am in this class, like I give them kind of a little template of this is how you communicate. But then usually, verbally when I talk to him, I explain, and I do give grace on we're in the South. If they say Miss Didier, they are being respectful because that's what they've been taught to say, so I do try to do that. But I explain to them, err on the conservative side and say, call everyone doctor. All of your professors and teachers, call them all doctor until they tell you otherwise. And try to, just educate that way. And sometimes it's via an email. If you get the, hey, I'll if it's Miss Didier, I'll just answer with Dr. Didier, things like that. But if it's the hey or something, okay, this is not how you address, I'll do a little education before I answer the actual email. So that's, if anyone else wants to jump in. If not, we can move to the next. So the next set of questions that are coming through are all pretty much dealing, we have 3 different ones, but they're all really talking about due to COVID. So now we're no longer, walking down the hall saying, hey, you want to grab lunch, or hey, you want to go get coffee or do this. We're all separated. And so how do you now interact with that DIPTAC committee, or how do you now make those relationships for determining, oh, what are you working on? Oh, can we collaborate, when we're really just not on campus and we're not getting that same level of interaction?
Yeah, so the way that I would do it if I was starting over again is I would look at my faculty and I would look at their CVs, and I would, because those are all accessible to everyone. If you don't know how, I can show you a quick trick to find them. But I would find projects that really interest me. And then I would pick one person a month, and I would reach out to that person and see if we could have a phone conversation or a Zoom conversation. And I would have questions to ask them about their project or their research interest or a class that they taught that we have in common. But I would find something that I could ask and learn from them about, something that worked well for them, something that they would do differently if they did it again. And I would just listen and learn. And it's amazing what people will share with you when you're interested. So that's how I would start to build relationships. I don't think you have to see people face to face to do that. But I would just have a strategic way to start reaching out to people, not all at once, just start small, just with one person, and build from there.
This is Amanda. So I may be old fashioned, but I actually call people. And I call people that are in my faculty that I haven't talked to in a while and say, hey, how you doing? What's going on? How are classes going? Like I will call people, probably like people that I haven't seen. I just call them and say, hey, like again, that's again back to my philosophy of building relationships in times when we don't need people. So I just call and check in with everybody who I don't see on faculty meetings or I haven't seen on campus. And I mean, I just said, pick up the phone and I call them.
This is something really small, but if you're in a departmental meeting, turn on your camera. I think it really sends a message of wanting to engage. And I know that you can't control what other faculty are doing, but the fact that you have your camera on and you're showing facial expressions and interest, I think goes a long way. So I would really recommend that.
Yeah, and I agree with what everyone has said. I also agree with Ann about making sure that the video is on. That just shows a level of engagement and that, you care about what's going on. It's not that you don't care if your camera's off, and maybe you can't have it on every time, but when you can, I think that would be a good thing to do. And I also agree with Amanda about making phone calls. I also will just call faculty that I haven't seen in a while. Again, it's just about building this. A lot of academia is about relationships. It's really about relationship building and being present and getting to know people. So I think as long as you're making an effort, no one's going to be perfect. You might be afraid to say the wrong thing, but no one's perfect. We're all in this together. Let's just kind of get to know each other as respectfully as we can.
And I don't think that this question is specific to COVID, but it has a similar flair about interacting with tenured faculty. And if you guys have any advice for when some of the tenured faculty don't seem so interested in having those kinds of conversations, if they don't come out to their offices, they don't seem to enjoy social interactions, or just generally difficult to engage with, what would be your advice in those situations?
Yeah, so what I have found is that regardless of how social someone is, for the most part, if you can get them talking about something they're interested in, they will talk to you. And, I'm not an extrovert. So these are things I have to really work on. But if you ask someone about their research, their project, their textbook, their award, whatever it is that you see that you could ask them about. Yeah, now not everyone wants to talk to you about their kids or their family. You kind of can sense that just by listening to the conversations in your office. But for the people who tend to stay in their office, I would go and knock on their door and say, hey, can you tell me about this textbook you wrote? I'm teaching org behavior next semester. Can you give me some tips? Those are some things that I would do.
Also, I think if you have control over it for your committee assignments in your department, see if you can get on a committee with some of the people that you don't know very well, because maybe you'll be working together on a common goal and you'll get to know each other organically as well.
That is great advice. I guess we'll put out a call for anyone who has additional questions. You can put them, there's an anonymous Q&A box, just as a reminder, so you can type any questions there. And I guess as we wait for any questions to come in, I will put in a plug to join We Lead as an organization. If you want to stay in the loop on everything that We Lead is doing. We encourage you to become a member, like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I think we have all three. But
Yeah,
we do things like this and more.
find the link and throw it in there.
Okay, perfect.
But I'll throw something out there. So I know it's hard sometimes to balance your teaching and research. Like you know, or many of us love teaching, and that, I mean, that is our love, and that's what we like to do. And so we'll put a little too much time sometimes on all the prep and doing that, and then the research gets pushed to the back burner. So what are some of the like tips or ways that you have sort of made sure that you've put that time in for the research?
For me, that is the hardest part of the job, is because it's unstructured time, it's non-calendar time, it's non-urgent time. And that is the skill I had to learn was, you know, a third to a fourth of my job is research. Does my calendar reflect that each week? And if it doesn't, then one of my strategies is every Sunday, write it on my calendar. Another strategy is to have an annual or semi-annual research planning meeting, sometimes with yourself, maybe with some mentors, so that you know what projects you're working on. You know, I had it all mapped out on a whiteboard. Another strategy is I set a goal for myself each week of how many times I'm going to show up to the page, if you will, or to the work or to the research or whatever it is that you define as that part of your life. And then I actually have to keep a log and have an accountability partner and check in. And that is the way I get things done. There's some really fascinating research about productivity in the academy. And if you're interested, I can suggest some books about that. But I just really, I mean, so to me, that's really neat. Someone who studied really productive scholarship and non-productive scholarship. And what they found is that people who do a little bit over time, rather than these big binge writing sessions, produce more and they enjoy it more. And so that is a habit, just like any habit, walking, exercise, eating. It's just the process of building a habit. And but the first thing is realizing how important it is in your success to get to tenure, because otherwise, you know, in 5 years you won't have a job if you don't learn how to do that. And that really was my wake-up call, that I've got to like really come on board here and learn how to do this, and not only manage my time, but also the skill of it and the whole nuance of writing for publication and journals, and just there's just all these other layers out there. So that's why I suggest so much, and having really good mentors that will be willing to lead you through that, because it's not for the faint of heart. So
one thing that I learned, first of all, I agree with working with people that hold you accountable. That's a big one. And then I just had like a note card with me all the time of just the projects and different things that I was working on in my to-do list for them. And every time I would get something done, I would cross it out. And then I just have a feeling of accomplishment. And I would just have it with me all the time until I got to where I was trying to go. So it didn't stress me out, but it just kept before me, you are working on this paper. So that type of thing.
Sorry, go ahead, Amanda.
All right, I'm really big on, you know, have you ever heard the joke, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So that's really the way that I function. Like, I write every Monday through Friday for 30 minutes. I do something related to research, whether it's a lit review and reading an article, whether it's looking for a potential funding source. Every single day, I dedicate 30 minutes, just 30 minutes. I mean, I figure it's kind of like exercise. And when I go to the gym, I tell myself, anybody can do anything for a half an hour, right? You can do anything for 30 minutes. So one bite at a time, little by little by little. I'm not one of these people who functions well on what someone had mentioned, like the research purge, where you try to sit down and write, 20 pages in a day. That doesn't work well for me, but I do 30 minutes every single day. And it's just worked really well for me.
I just wanted to let everyone know about the faculty writing circles. So you all have mentioned, having accountability and structure, and the faculty writing circles really helped me. This is something that PACE has. And in the past, they've been in a physical room together. They're virtual right now, but they really helped me to get research done, especially writing. But even if I just needed to read and think, it was a place, at least, virtually or physically, where other people were doing the same thing. And it just made it more enjoyable. And it was on the calendar, and I didn't want to let people down by not showing up. And so it was really helpful to me.
We have another question that came in. Do you have any tips for how to deal with the situation when you're being told different things regarding what you need to do to get tenure from different people on the DipTech committee?
So take it all under advisement because those are the people voting on you. So figure out what each person thinks it means and then figure out how to do that. And I realize there's discrepancies in that, but for the most part, it is going to come together in some sort of center. But really knowing what your DipTech values is so important. And that's where you can ask questions about specifics like, should I spend my time on a book chapter right now? Should I spend my time, like, where should I spend my time? What type of research activities are most valued by this particular department? And that's not written in a document. Okay, so even though we have policies and documents, these kind of things are not written down. They'll never be written down. They change as members come and go. So trying to predict who your DipTech is going to be in 5 years, can't do that either. So you just go with what you know for right now. And, more than likely you're going to be fine if you have those 3 areas and your collegial. But I don't want to minimize it and make it sound like it's easy peasy either. So.
I think the annual review that you receive as a non-tenured faculty member is really important, because ideally that review is going to be a summary of what was discussed. And those are going to be the major points that the majority of people felt were important to emphasize to you as you're coming up for tenure. So I agree with Julie. Try to listen to it all and try to do it all if you can. But if you have to prioritize, use that annual review as the priorities.
I completely agree with that, with Dr. Gilliard and the annual review as setting your priorities. One of the things that was noted on my 3rd year review was that I needed to be more involved with professional organizations. That I had spent, I'd spent my time in the classroom and doing research, but I was not very involved with the professional organizations in my field. So I knew that that was something that I needed to do. So I started attending professional organizations and going to meetings. So that was not an issue when it came up for my actual tenure review. So use that advice that they're giving you. They're trying to help you on, on your reviews and your 3rd year review and your annual review. Read it and actually do it.
Yeah, well, also I would say add to that, have a discussion with your department chair. So I was a department chair, my department chair, was there for me. They can often interpret things for you. They're not part of the DipTech, but more than likely they've been on the DipTech. And they've seen, so like what you want to know is about the patterns in your department. And so maybe you ask the question, has there ever, I don't need names, but who wasn't tenured and what were the reasons why? If someone didn't get tenure in this department, what was the problem or what was the reason? It's usually reasons, it's not just one reason. But finding out about some of those histories, you can really learn a lot from. But I would also say have discussions with the DipTech chair and the department chair to find, because just because things are written on paper, like, for instance, they might have told me, well, you need more first author publications. However, that was probably just one member writing that. That wasn't really what my DipTech felt was really important. So if I would have put all my energy around that, I could have gotten myself off track. So I think it's really important to have people that can, zoom out and give you the big picture of just keep going. You're spending your time where you need to. they feel like they all need to give some criticism of some type, you know, just keep going forward, keep doing this, you're on the right track, so that you don't get off track by just one little comment. But that you also take feedback. And to me, that's where the department chair can be invaluable in that council, and how you respond to their feedback, and what they're expecting. So those are all questions I would ask.
Yeah, I would just add on the, so like Amanda said, address or do what they say, basically, you know, best you can. But if you can't, then address it, you know, like make sure that that is something that's been, you know, I know, okay, this was requested last year. Here's my, you know, document for this year. And this is why this is still missing, or this is still incomplete, or something along those lines. And not that you just ignored them. You know, kind of like some of my students, you know, they do a rough draft, you give them all this feedback, they turn in the final and it's the same errors. I'm like, you failed, you know, like you didn't listen to anything I said. You wasted my time. But, you know, don't do that. But, you know, right, you want to address that. Somewhat related to what we're talking about is a question on any advice for when DIPTAC members are specifically looking for different publication numbers and they're almost physically impossible.
You might want to visit with your department chair about so we have a really specific policy as far as numbers. I mean, ours is what we call the 10+5 rule. We need at least a minimum of 10 peer-reviewed journal articles, plus 5 national presentations, regional something along that presentation line, some type of scholarship. We also need to have works in progress. The quality of the journal isn't as important, neither is the authorship order, but to have publications consistent year after year, a few every year, that's important as well. So all of those factors are part of our policy. If some people are saying 20 and some people are saying 5, then I would counsel with the department chair to try to find out what the reasonable ballpark is for your discipline. And is that just one person on DIPTAC? Is that person still going to be there? Just all those kind of questions I would try to ask, because they are just one vote, but they can influence others. So really finding out what that's about and what that means. Quantity, does that mean quality? What does that look like? Look at their CV. Where are they publishing? Sometimes they're not.
Well, I believe that those are all of the questions that we have. So I think just first and foremost, I want to thank all of our panelists here today. This has been very helpful. I will speak as an untenured faculty member myself. It has been good to just hear different people's perspectives on some of these issues. And we hope to be able to put together events like this in the future. We have a lot of professional development events, not necessarily specific to tenure, but we have a book club coming up in the spring about women in leadership and these types of roles that we play in the university. So thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of the participants. And we hope to see you at events in the future.
All right, and if our panelists, if y'all can stay and then smile or say cheese, so Tiffany will take our picture. Hopefully. Did you take it, Tiffany? Hopefully she got it. Oh.
I got it, but I wanted, Lisa, are you still here? I wanted for Lisa to take a screenshot because I took it, but on my view, it has me in the camera and like on the participant view, it doesn't. So I was going to yeah, Lisa is still here.
Okay.
So y'all hang tight for just a second. That way I'm not in the picture. I don't want to be in the picture.
All right. So yeah, if Lisa
Just because I'm staff, I'm not faculty.
do a screen clipping into Word or PowerPoint or something. Whatever you get to do.
Okay, so Lisa is gonna take the picture. I'm gonna pause it. She said that she'll take it.
Okay.
So y'all count to 5 after I get off, and then Lisa will.
All right. All right, everybody, cheese. All right, she says perfect. We're good. Breathe.
Okay, thanks, y'all.
All right, thank you for having me. It was really good.
Everyone.
Yes, thank everyone for doing.